For instance.
For instance, obviously your dad is not the only significant family figure in this book. You write a lot about your grandparents.
Right.
Before we get to the legendary story of your grandfather, what is the image of your grandparents you hope we're left with? They are colorful characters?
The image that I was left with, I was trying to make sense of my grandparents, and they represented a generational difference. Kids were there to cavil over, to heap praise on, but not really to listen to. We were there as accoutrements, adornments. You do something good, but get out of the way. I had very colorful grandparents. I'm sure most of you have had, and my brothers and I would have fun with that. There was an incident that my grandfather and my father had an argument in 1968 during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. We were at the, of all places, Jolly Fisherman in Long Island, and and my grandfather, who, God bless him, Papa, we called him Papa, thin man, he was drinking a little bit too much Wild Turkey, I think, said, "The police should run all the protesters over. They should bash their heads in." And my father calmly said, "Well, would that be true if it were your own grandchildren?" And my grandfather didn't expect to hear that from my father because they normally got along fine. And my grandfather stood up, and my brothers and I were watching this, and we were eating our food. All of a sudden, "What is the census of the basis? What is the census of the basis?" And those words still ring in my head to this day. And spit was flying, his neck veins were red, he was just livid. And my brothers started immediately, and for months on afterwards, saying to me, "What is the census of the basis?" And I'm the youngest son, and they're pestering me, as older brothers do. So they keep on saying that. And I still don't know what the census of the basis is. But so I called my story "The Census of the Basis," and I tried to figure out more about what my grandparents were, what their lives were like, what led them to be who they were. And I think I kind of captured their essence. I wanted to bring them back to life. I knew them, and yet I didn't know them. I loved them. They had funny stories. They were contradictions, walking contradictions. They would talk about the hippies with the long hair and calling them goyles, but my brothers and I all had long hair, and they never seemed to be bothered by that. There was an incident where Papa, I'll pick on him, was at a drugstore, and he picked up a Playboy magazine off the rack, and I'm standing right next to him, like 11. And he's opening it up in the centerfold. "Look at this garbage! Just look at this!" And he's like, with his pained expression, he's looking at the centerfold. So I'm like craning my head to look, and then he closes it, and then he picks up a Penthouse magazine. "Would you just look at this garbage? Just look at it," So I mean, they were walking contradictions. The world seemed upside down to them in the 60s and 70s. Civil rights, the hippie movement, women with mini skirts. My mother wore a mini skirt. My grandfather he walked out of Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, the movie, and with all his condo mates because of the nudity and foul language, and demanded their money back, and wished that all films were like Dames at Sea, and couldn't understand why, what happened to this world. It was upside down. Yet we were a product of the time with long hair, and so I wanted to capture the flavor of my grandparents. I think I did a pretty good job.
Do you think you appreciated their contradictions at the time, or was it really only after kind of recasting them as you wrote this book did you appreciate how they lived in kind of both universes?
I think I've always been kind of a reporter with an eye for detail and just watching. In fact, most people remembered me as just big eyes, big round eyes. That's what they saw. That's how I've been described as a little kid. And the pictures, there they are. My brother drew my beautiful big eyes. So I was just soaking everything in. Again, kids were there to observe and be quiet. So I didn't really appreciate them, but we certainly enjoyed and were amused by them. And so afterward, my brothers and I would then, "Can you believe what she just said?" My grandmother, Nanny, when we were watching a screening of the movie The Godfather before it came out. In the scene, in several scenes, but mostly in the scene where Michael Corleone's bride, Apollonia, opens up her blouse to show her breasts, I felt these cold, rubbery hands in my eyes. It smelled of Shalimar perfume and Benson and Hedges cigarettes. And it's like really annoying. And then when the horse head scene happened, same hand went over, this rubbery hand went over my eyes. So, I mean, they're amusing anecdotes. We had to live with them. They weren't, sometimes they weren't the easiest, but we appreciated them much later. And I think, especially in writing about them.
I'm fascinated to know that my grandparents' hands were not the only ones that smelled like Shalimar perfume and Benson and Hedges cigarettes.